Hello viewers, welcome to this module on occupational hazards associated with the agricultural and allied sector, and we will focus on the physical and the chemical hazards. This forms a part of MEV 002 Environmental and Occupational Hazards, and I introduce myself as Dr. Sushmita Bhaskar, working in the discipline of Environmental Studies at the School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies, Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. Let us now see the learning objectives of this module. So, after listening to and reading this module, you will be able to explain the various physical hazards and the chemical hazards that are faced by the workers in the agricultural and the allied sectors. Now, agriculture, if we see, it is one of the oldest occupations, and India itself is an agrarian country, and it is a fundamental primary occupation of all human beings. It is considered as a foundation of all social, cultural and economical condition of the mankind. And the oldest civilization of the world depends on agriculture. So, even now for our sustenance and our survival and livelihoods, we are dependent on agriculture. And this can be defined as the cultivation of animals, plants, fungi and other forms of life forms for even the non-food products like the food, fiber, the biofuel and other products, everything that is need to sustain life. Agriculture affects health, and health in turn it affects agriculture. It supports health by providing food and nutrition for globally for the world's people. We have witnessed great changes in the production in the agricultural patterns, particularly in the last 40 years. This may be due to certain environmental degradation practices, then environmental deforestation, climate change and so on. Nowadays, in many parts of the world, agriculture is becoming increasingly mechanized with the use of the chemical fertilizers, pesticides and other certain harmful chemicals. So, this change in the agricultural work practice, this is improving the agricultural production, but along with this it is also bringing it risk of adverse health effect. The result is that agriculture ranks among the most hazardous occupational industries and the work professions, and the workers are at risk for several illnesses, for disability and in very extreme cases even death. The agricultural production and the food consumption, this can increase the risk of certain diseases and health hazards that are linked with the specific agricultural systems and practices. Now, let us see the occupational hazards that are associated with this sector. One of the dangerous occupations globally which is recognized is the agricultural profession. The International Labour Organization and the Food and Agriculture Organization have reported several work related accidents every year, especially in agriculture. Now, the physical hazards, for instance, they include exposure to weather, to terrain, to the fires and also to the machinery. Now, other hazards in the agriculture, the workers are also prone to hazards due to pesticides, fertilizers, fuels and dust. Other hazards include animal handling, contact with certain dangerous plants, biological agents that lead to allergies, respiratory disorders, zoonotic infections and also parasitic diseases. The agriculture sector, this can be divided into four main subsectors, namely for the production of crops, for the livestock, that is both production and animal health, the fisheries and aquaculture, which includes capture fisheries also, and forestry. So, these are the four main subsectors that the agricultural sector can be divided into. Let us now see the physical hazards. So, physical hazards, the agricultural workers, they work and toil in the field, and there can be heat and the sun, and they can also work during the very cold conditions in dusty environments where then there is rain. So, heat, humidity, cold, the solar rays, all this can affect their health. Then the noise is also another important parameter. There can be the mechanized noise from certain equipments that are used on the farms, and that can cause certain deafness. Then vibration, where certain dryers and other vibrators are used for the agricultural plant post harvest and all that. So, there again they can be exposed to certain physical hazards. Then ergonomic hazards, the use of inadequate equipment and tools, and this can result in unnatural body posture for prolonged time. If you have seen that for a prolonged time, for hours together, they will be weeding and they will be also tilling the soil, then they will be also putting the planting or sowing the plants in the seeds in the fields. So all this can give them inadequate and unnatural body positions and postures. Then again they will be carrying loads, heavy loads on their back. That will also cause stress and strain to their back and their muscles. Then the work can be repetitive and it can be excessively long hours that they may be working. All this can have an impact on the ergonomy. Extreme temperatures, that is due to the weather conditions. And the machinery such as tractors, the trucks and the harvesters, there can be also cutting machines and certain piercing tools. All these machines also, they can create lot of sound and they can be harmful. They can even pierce, tear or even chop a certain animal or the skin lesion, bring about skin lesions in human beings. Now coming on to noise. Agricultural noise is a common health hazard on the farm and the workers can be exposed to higher levels of even more than 85 decibels. So this noise induced hearing loss can affect the farmers. Prolonged exposure to excessive noise such as those that are produced by the choppers, by the tractors, by grain dryers and other equipment, all this can cause a permanent hearing and the ear damage. So for the then overexposure again in the ear, there can be a ringing sound that is heard, that is referred to as tinnitus. So that can result in the temporary threshold shift in the affecting the ear and the inner ear membranes. How can we control the noise? Maybe by using certain ear muffs and also the ear plugs. Typical farm noises that can damage hearing, that includes those of the tractor. You can see that ranges between 95 and 100 decibels. Then there are certain orchard sprayers and the angle grinder, bench grinder, chainsaws. All this, the decibel is it ranges between 95 to 120 decibels, which is a very high hearing range. Next is heat stress. This occurs when the body builds up more heat than it can handle. So the body is not able to handle so much of heat, and high temperature, high humidity, sunlight, heavy workloads, all this can increase the likelihood of heat stress. Then due to heat, certain phototoxic and photoallergic reactions can occur because light in combination with other substances, this can bring about certain skin diseases. Then other types of agricultural dermatitis that can include the heat rash. And how can we control the heat stress? Maybe by using fan, by the ventilation system, by using shades, then the tree canopy, and also drinking lots of water so that the body remains hydrated. Now in this tabular column, you can see the categories, the exposure and the potential consequence. So the physiological work design, here you can see the heavy lifting, prolonged standing, overexertion, all this can lead to the low back pain, then the shoulder pain, then tendonitis, then the carpal tunnel syndrome, etc. Then the physical hazards, this can be due to slips and trip in the places. Then there can be falls from certain height, transport and trucking from the machinery. Then there can be electrical short circuits, then there can be fire, heat, cold, all this, and certain noise. And this can all cause injuries, cuts, burns, certain broken bones, amputation, hypothermia, then hyperthermia, drowning, electrocution, also injury related certain diseases. And in extreme cases, it can cause death, asphyxiation and sprains and also strains. Chemical hazards. Here the chemical hazards, as the name indicates, this is because of using chemicals and chemical substances in the field either for growth or for tackling certain insects and weeds. Now the pesticides, fertilizers, antibiotics, animal feed additives and veterinarian products, all this contain chemicals of varying orders. Many agricultural workers are exposed to chemicals on a daily basis. So these pesticides, they can enter through the skin and also by inhalation. The control can be by using the personal protective clothing, by equipment. Then you can have chemical resistant controls like wearing an apron, face shield and also certain rubber gloves. And again, the aprons and the boots and all the rubber gloves that they are wearing, they have to be washed daily with soap and water, dried thoroughly inside out, and all the pesticide residue should be removed. Then the clothing worn while handling the pesticide, this should be washed separately, separate from the other clothing and the other clothes. Now this table, it shows the chemical, whether it is toxic, flammable, corrosive, and it can also be explosive type of a chemical. They include disinfectants that are used there, parasitoids, the pesticides, fungicides, antifoliants, Then you can have certain antibiotics that are given to animals, then anesthetics, then the radon gas from the water source, and so on. So, there is so much to list under the chemicals. Then this can cause respiratory illnesses, burns, cancer. It can affect the central nervous system. Then it can cause birth defects, reproductive effect, they can cause hematopoietic effects, and also certain infections of the lung, eye and the skin irritations. Now in this figure you can see the occupational hazards due to pesticide exposure. You can see that the farmers are spraying the fields without using any personal protective equipment. And in this case they are not wearing a mask or a face shield or even gloves, and that way they will be inhaling these poisonous chemical vapors through their nasal system, and it can attack their respiratory, it can enter their systems, and also it can be absorbed through their skin. In the left side of the same slide you can see the health effects of the pesticide carbofuran. So even a quarter teaspoon of this, it can cause death, which is an extreme situation. Otherwise it can cause respiratory paralysis, nausea, dizziness and confusion. It can cause permanent damage to the reproductive system, to the nervous system, and it is normally used for the cultivation of rice, maize, pepper, banana, sugarcane and brinjal, and it is banned in Canada, European Union and also in the United States. The hazards of the pesticides, normally the routes of the inhalation, it can enter through the nose, that is inhalation through food and water, through the mouth, and also absorption through the skin. The exposure level, it can be a chronic exposure and acute exposure, and the health effect, it depends on the specific pesticide, whether it is organochlorine, organophosphorus etc., and it can affect the central nervous system. It can cause eye irritation, hormone imbalances can be caused, it can cause cancer, liver damage, skin irritation and reproductive effects. Now the chemical pesticides. Here again there are risks with the synthetic pesticides. So here you see that the pesticides, they can cause pesticide poisoning and health hazard, and they can also poison the food commodities. Then the pest resistance and pest resurgence, then it can upset the entire ecological balance. So when we put these kind of chemical pesticides, the entire food chain and the ecology of region can be affected. Then they eliminate the natural enemies of the pest, which can actually be tackled well when we use biopesticides or when there is a natural system in place. They are endocrine and reproductive disruptors, so they can cause defects in these organs. Then they can also have certain other effects like bioaccumulation and biomagnification of the residues in the food chains. That means that the concentration on the of an element and is more, it is concentrated like 5 or 10 times. In the same way, if one element is present, whether it is mercury or lead, then that can be bioaccumulated and bioconcentrated many times in the environment than which is originally present in that system as such. Next is the hazardous substances. This can come in many forms, and they include the pesticides and fuels, chemicals, paints, manures, medicines, animal fluids, construction materials. Then we have the pesticides and fumigants, you have solvents, then we have timber preservatives, cleaning agents and disinfectants, veterinary medicines, fertilizers, manure, then the fuel and the oils, asbestos, wood dust, grain is also in the large quantities. Health impacts. So all these agrochemicals, they can result in chronic health conditions and diseases like cancer, reproductive and endocrine, immunological, congenital and developmental disorders. It can cause wheezing and nausea by irritating the linings of the lungs if very large numbers are inhaled. The chemical residues can also cause depression and insomnia, and accumulation of the excess nitrogen in the plants can cause an infant disease that is also called as methemoglobinemia, and it is also referred to as the blue baby syndrome. Then amines produced from the nitrogenous fertilizers, that can cause cancer in the human beings. Aluminium at very high levels, this can lead to birth defects, asthma, then Alzheimer's and also the bone disease. Calcium toxicity result in developmental and neurological toxicity, then it can cause growth retardation, cognitive delay in understanding and the learning ability, then the kidney, nervous and the immune system, all this can be damaged. Cobalt, this also can cause high levels, if it is present in high levels, then it can cause lung damage. Boron causes low sperm count, nose, throat and the eye irritations can occur. Manganese also causes respiratory and reproductive and gastrointestinal damage and failure. Lindane. This causes breast cancer and acts as a nerve poison. It also affects the reproductive system and is known as carcinogen. The chlorpyrifos, this also causes fetal malnutrition, pneumonia, muscle paralysis and even death to respiratory failure. Malathion can damage the nervous system when it enters the body. DDT, that is diphenyl trichloroethane. This is a common insecticide and it affects the nervous system and it can act as a carcinogen. There is a strong association between breast cancer and the clinical exposure to the chemical pesticides, and the excessive application of potassium fertilizers. This has decreased vitamin C and the carotene content in many vegetables, and excessive application of the nitrogenous fertilizers. This has increased the incidence of pest and disease in the crop plants. 60% of all the herbicides and 90% of all fungicides and 30% of all insecticides, these are all potentially cancer causing. Now, workers can be exposed to pesticides in a number of ways. Directly when they are working in the field where they have been applied, breathing in the pesticide from the same field or from adjoining field, working in a pesticide free treated field without proper personal protective equipments, eating with pesticide contaminated hands, eating with contaminated the fruits and the vegetables, eating in a pesticide contaminated field, and also drinking and bathing in the waters that are contaminated with the pesticides. So therefore, what do we understand from all this? We need to take a look into sustainable agriculture and shift from this kind of an agriculture to sustainable agriculture for achieving the sustainable development goals. Regenerative agriculture, and it shifts the paradigm. So if you see the conventional and the chemical based farming that can compete with nature, it can disturb the soil, it can result in monocultures, and it has a reductionist approach. Whereas when we use the bio fertilizers and bio practices, and when we work sustainably, then we can partner with nature, we can protect the soil, there could be good biodiversity, and it is a holistic approach of working in the fields. So conservation agriculture can be brought about, and that requires minimum soil disturbance, the permanent soil cover, crop residue or live mulch. Then there is crop rotation and also intercropping, which will facilitate better growth and development of the next crop season and the plant. Lastly, focusing on biopesticides and integrated pest management. So this is very important. The main principles of integrated pest management, this utilizes synthetic pesticides having high levels of selectivity and are low risk compounds. There is selection and cultivation of the resistant plant varieties. Then physical methods will include the tillage, mowing and mechanical weeders. Then the regular practice of certain disease suppressing cultivation methods like crop rotation, intercropping and also the mixed cropping. All these will be used. Then they use the natural products like botanicals in the management of the harmed the enemies and the species that are causing them the destruction. Then biological control with the aid of natural enemies like parasitoids, then predatory insects, mites, parasites and the microbial pathogens. So all this leads to they form a basic part of the IPM. In the same way, organic farming practices can also be employed, where we can use the green leaf manures, and also the domestic waste can be transformed into the organic rich manure. Also the vermicompost can be done, where earthworms are used in order to turn the waste into rich manure. So this vermicompost, it is a simple biotechnological process of composting the organic weeds in a compost with the help of earthworms. And the fine black granular substance which is produced is called as the castings. It is nutrient rich, it is a natural fertilizer and soil conditioner, and it will sustain the healthy plant growth, and which is vital for the plant growth. It also adds the beneficial microorganisms and soil fauna, which all help to build the soil. It will help the nutrients also to be available in a available form for consumption for the plants. So these are the biofertilizers which are ready to use live formulations of beneficial microorganism, and they can be applied for seeds, for roots, for the soils, and they can mobilize the availability of the nutrient by their biological activity, and they can help build the microflora and the soil health in general. So it can enhance the plant growth, it can also improve the fertility and reduce pollution, and the biofertilizers will contain the living cells and the latent cells of different species and strains of microorganisms that help the plant uptake, and they help the plant take up the nutrients from the surroundings. So biofertilizers, this results in a supply of good nutrients to the soil. Then there will be maintenance of symbiotic relationships between the species in the in that place. Then microbial consortia, or they can maintain the microbial consortia in the soil. Then there will be enhanced food production. Then there will be improved soil health, and finally there will also be, it will suppress the pathogenic microorganisms that are present and which will harm the crop. So these are some of the advantages of using the biofertilizers. So dear learners and viewers, in this module we have learnt and understood some of the physical and the chemical hazards that are caused in the agricultural and allied sectors, and these are the occupational hazards. Mostly the workers who are working in the agricultural farms and areas, they face these the brunt of these hazards. And we also focused on certain sustainable agricultural practices and how biofertilizers, vermicomposting and organic farming are alternates, and we can avoid the use of chemicals, and that will be good for the betterment of the soil health, the ecology, the environment, and also for the human health. Thank you.